Okay, I think it's about time to get started. If our moderator and panelists can join me here on screen. Okay, fantastic. Well, welcome everyone to our session on the biotech revolution for materials, biotechnology scale-up. I'd like to introduce our moderator for this session, David Kaplan, Biomedical Engineering Chair at Tufts University School of Engineering. David's research focal areas are on biopolymer engineering, tissue engineering, and regenerative medicine and cellular agriculture. He's published over 900 peer-reviewed papers. He's editor-in-chief of the journal ACS Biomaterial Science and Engineering, and he serves on many editorial boards and programs for journals and universities. Welcome, David.
Thanks so much, Anastasia. And welcome, panel team. And it's great to be here to talk to the audience on the topic of white space opportunities, the biotech revolution for materials. So I'm pretty excited about this. Those of you who know me, who are out there listening, this is my passion for the last 30 plus years of my research career. So I couldn't be happier to meet and talk with some of our panelists today, because they're really leading the new generation of impact of these materials. So thank you to our four panelists for being on today and spending an hour with our audience. I think the best thing to do is to kick it off by having each of the panelists give a little bit of an overview of their background and what they're doing in the field, and then we'll get to some Q&A time, and then at the end we'll open it up to the audience for other questions. So I'm going to just work from top left to bottom right on my screen. So basically Axel, then Zimri, then Isse, and then Francois. So you know who's going. So Axel, I'll turn it to you if you'd like to give the audience a bit of a background summary of yourself and what you're doing today.
Hi, everyone. Thank you. Or me, I'm gonna introduce first.
That's fine. Go ahead. Yeah.
Okay. So thank you for having me, and thank you for the introduction, David. And I'm CEO and founder of Gözen Institute. We are Turkey's leading material science and design company, and we are inventing and developing next-gen materials based on microdrops, materials that can really replace animal and synthetic leather. And, you know, I founded my company 2 years ago, a biotech company, as a biodesigner, because my journey started as a fashion designer 12 years ago, and I had my own fashion brand. But even as a fashion designer, I always had the vision of, you know, combining science, technology, design, and fashion together, so that can really create an impact. But by the time, I felt like bad, because I was, you know, as a fashion designer, I was serving to the industry. It's really harm to environment and its people. So 5 years ago, I stopped everything, like preparing collections, and I started my own biomaterial research project. And I was working with bacterial cellulose. And when I saw the big potential, the biomaterials that I invented, I wanted to connect all the dots and combine it together as a biotech, fashion, and design. And right now, xylazine is our very first biomaterial that can really replace animal and synthetic leather. And we are growing our game-changer innovation in our lab in just 2 weeks, and it's made from bacterial nanocellulose, and we are feeding that cells with really 100% renewable and natural ingredients. And last year, we launched xylazine in Paris for the first time, because we have been selected one of the deep tech pioneer by Hello Tomorrow, and people came and touched the xylazine and smell and saw the big potential. So we built really some meaningful collaboration there. Right now, we are working with well-known fashion brands to prototyping, testing our material. But I would like to add, we are not just, you know, creating biomaterials. Thanks to our creativity and visionary part, we are also creating some gorgeous products, so brands can imagine and visualize like how they can create meaningful products also, right now, I would like to show you first time the gorgeous product that we made. We can create lots of gorgeous products. So this kind of vision help brands like how they can create a better future.
Fantastic. Thank you, Eze. It's great to see the prototypes too. Wonderful.
Thank you.
Let's shift over for an introduction. Axel, are you able to join now? We can't hear you. You're muted. I don't have control of unmuting you, so maybe Anastasia, if you're still there, maybe you can try that. In the meantime, we can move to Zimri. Can you open? Yeah, there you go. Great. Thank you.
Yep, absolutely. Hey, David. Thank you for hosting today's panel. I really appreciate it. My name is Zimri Hinshaw, and I'm the CEO and founder of Bucha Bio. And what we do at Bucha Bio is unlock unique creative design potential for brands using biotechnology, starting with Qorium, which is a luxury biomaterial that can be used as a leather alternative. Much like my colleagues here, and I think I have a fun story to share about the background. I never got the opportunity, unlike Essay, to become a fashion designer, and I'm very jealous. I didn't get that opportunity. I had wanted to become a fashion designer because I had grown up in Japan and hung out with some Japanese street gangs, really rough and tumble folks. They wore the coolest motorcycle jackets I've ever seen in my life. When I came back to the US, I wanted to make some of those, and I wanted to become a designer, but I knew that I didn't want to use leather. I knew that that didn't kind of align with my personal values. And I was looking for materials, and I found, people experimenting little science projects, and probably people who see here, especially among this panel, have seen those kind of videos popping up online way back when. And people were saying, oh, it's an experiment. But like Essay, like Axel, like Francois, like everyone here, I think we saw a lot more than just an experiment. I think we saw a vision for an industry, for a real technology with real impact. And so started up, realized that instead of making the jackets, I could make the material, and quickly started studying biotechnology, leading to us to where we are today. So that's just a quick background. I'll show some prototypes too. check them out.
Well done. Well done. Thanks so much, Ray. Great overview. Plus the gang story really resonates. This is fantastic. Axel, looks like you're back. So we'll turn it to you.
Yeah. Sure. So thanks again for the time. I would like to start saying that true disruption comes with scale. Leather is a $33 billion US market, and scale requires enabling cost structure, like the cost of goods sold, labor, raw material, energy, all need to be sustainable and efficient in order to be scalable. Only a few geographies in the world allow for this condition to run 24/7, 365 days a year. Polybion is located in one of those geographies. Early last year, we closed our Series A 4 million euros round led by Blue Horizon Ventures. We're very happy for this because it validated us as their first material investment. They had invested in other top food companies like Impossible Foods, Beyond Meat, and others in their seed stages. So we're really happy to work with them. This year, we just launched our Series B round, and this will enable us to transcend leather. We want to be the new generation materials company, meaning we will transcend leather and produce what we call metamaterials, of course, at scale. And what we mean by metamaterial is a material never seen before by mankind, meaning a bioassembled material that's both biodegradable and high-performing, but yet grown from local waste. So in other words, designing materials at the nanoscale using biology's molecular palette. That's what we're doing, ranging from leather materials to plastic membranes and even organs. So also with great promise comes great responsibility to fulfill on that promise, and brutal honesty is a must. That's the reason why we waited in stealth mode for 7 years, working nonstop, 60-hour weeks on solving the scale problem by using R&D and assembling a great team of people that have been working on this since 2014 that Polybion was founded. Currently, we are 30 people, including biologists, biochemists, biotechnologists, engineers, designers, financiers, writers, and we have more than 5 PhDs on our team, plus 7 seasoned board members, and we're already hiring new specialists 4 or 5 specialists in different areas, such as leather specialists, sales representatives, and fashion experts. So we've come a long way since 2014 when we founded Polybion. Back then, the word biofabrication didn't exist. People thought we were crazy trying to grow materials. So we've learned a lot in those 7 years. And we're learning even more right now at a faster rate. So this is very exciting, the future for what's to come with these next generation materials. And the reason why nobody knew about Polybion until now is because of what I just said. We wanted to be sure that we could actually deliver on what we promised. And we're ready now. That's why we're here. And we will also be talking at Biofabricate to continue on this conversation. My name is Axel Gómez-Ortigoza. I'm the CEO and CTO at Polybion.
Fantastic. Thank you, Axel. All right, let's move on to Francois. Do you want to give an overview of your activities?
Yeah, sure. Thank you for the opportunity, David. Appreciate it. So I'm senior scientist at Qorium, based in the Netherlands. It was co-founded by Mark Post, known as the guy who did the first lab-grown burger. So to just add there, nicest person if you ever get to meet him. What we are basically trying to do is cruelty-free leather using cells from a cow by clever biotechnique repurposing. We aim to bring this type of laboratory leather to the market in a bit more efficient way than what we typically would envision could be done. My own background, besides what I'm doing now, I was involved as a founder as well as some R&D work in multiple companies, biomaterials based, stealth mode, pushing it to the MVP. And then when the fun part stopped and the business guys have to take over, I decided to go do something else that's fun. So I still have some interests here and there, but I leave the business things for people who enjoy working with numbers the whole day. I prefer to be on the creative play side and getting things to scale.
Fantastic.
And that's it from me.
Thank you, Francois. And I will second your comment about Mark, since I know him quite well. So, so first of all, thank you, the 4 of you, for joining for the time today. You guys are just doing amazing things. I am so excited. So this is just the beginning. More interactions, more planning in the future, I hope. So stay tuned for that. So for now, what I'd like to do is do a little bit of Q&A, and I'm going to sort of ask each of the panelists a question, but the rest of the panelists, after I single somebody out just to get the process going, please jump in with your own comments, or we'll move on to the next question. There's no overt agenda here, just to get more ideas out on the table and let the audience know what you're thinking and what you're doing. Okay, so maybe I see we can start with you. The first question I had is, and we've heard a little bit of this from each of you, but I'd like to just kind of coalesce it a bit more. So where do you see the first major consumer impact for this next generation of materials coming from this biotech revolution, both short term, the next 1 to 5 years, and maybe longer term? If you had to pick out what products consumers can actually go out and buy, and what industries are they going to impact the most?
Thank you. When I started my project 5 years ago, even scientists didn't believe me, like how we can collaborate together. But in 5 years, fashion and textile industry really shaping and, transforming. And right now, we can say mushroom lead the biomaterial and next generation leathers, but right now bacteria is the new cool thing, we must say. I think my colleague gonna agree with me as well. So but the challenge is here, to understanding and explaining the consumer why we are collaborating with organism. Like, we have to create a storytelling to create a bond between consumer and nature. So I think, if we say about the bacterial cellulose, there's only 21 company in this sector right now, but I believe in like 3 years it will reach like 100, and we are the first mover who is leading that. And I believe we need more company, more innovation to build that company. I don't see Zimri, Axel as a competitor. We are just we are growing this feature together, I must believe. And for the point of view of consumers, they are really when they see the alternative leathers, of course, they will not choose the leather product, you know, because right now when they use a leather bag, they're also responsible about, you know, losing of biodiversity and Amazons. So if we create more innovations, of course, consumer is gonna use kind of these innovations, and we are really happy to lead that industry.
So of those comments, if a consumer goes to a store in the next 5 years, what would they expect to be able to buy, if you have some vision there?
You know, all the fashion and textile things, bags, shoes, jackets, right, and interior designs as well. Fashion industry, also automobile interior industry, you know, we don't see any leather product in 5 years, I believe.
Okay, great. Other thoughts on that question, anyone?
I'll jump in and just give kind of, you know, I think within 5 years, you know, based on the collaborations that we're having as a brand and kind of the timelines that we're seeing different brands make it to market, have plans for market goods, you know, I think we're going to see the smallest factor form items first, right? And that's just low barrier to entry. Your things like this watch band, things like the footwear. I think you're going to see footwear. I think you're going to see watch bands, things that are small fashion items that are quick to market like that. I think in the mid-grade term, then you'll see sort of the larger items, the jackets, the coats, some of the larger items in terms of fashion. And then I think, you know, outside of 5 years, you know, we really see adoption in automotive, you know, at a larger scale. Prices come down. This industry becomes a little bit more mature. You know, additionally, I think outside of 5 years, you start to get things like IKEA start to rolling out, you know, materials that are designed here all across the world. You know, I think that furniture becomes a lot more viable. You start to get that scale as a more mature industry. So I think it'll start with smaller factor form items. That's what we're seeing. That's the kind of collaborations that we're having, you know, and of course, those longer term developments for things like automotive that we're having, we see more of a 3 to 5 year outlook.
So I think that the first industries will be impacted is the ones just mentioned. We already have some prototypes. For example, you can see the sandal. The material is very, very flexible. We also have some sneakers that looking pretty good. Also have some bags that we already made. Pretty cool. When we can also have materials that look very similar to actual leather, you know, like so these are the items that will be impacted first, then automotive, as already said, but there are all the industries that will be impacted. For example, electronics, membranes, plastic membranes made with this for packaging, like bubble wrap. I mean bacterial cellulose, which is what we do. But there's also other companies doing, for example, cement and for concrete applications and other minerals. And then in the long run, we will also grow tissues for tissue engineering, for cell-based meat, for organs. And then after 10 years, we'll see other metamaterials like the one I just commented. So what we're trying to do at Polybion is that it's a platform for the future of biofabrication, meaning not only one material, but growing all materials we need either on this planet or on other planets. In order to do that, you need to do what we're doing, which is using waste as raw material. That's the only way to do it. So yeah, those are the industries I think that will be impacted, but in general, humanity will be impacted because when we humans get our materials, since ancestral times, materials have limited humans' ability to create and to design. For example, when we understood that concrete with steel work well in tension and in compression strengths, then we started creating bigger and taller buildings. And so that's how biomaterials will change the whole of humanity, because they will change the palette of materials that we can actually design and work with, and in a sense, change humanity forever.
Thanks, Axel. Francois, did you want to add anything? Or?
Yes, I'm happy to see the enthusiasm, because it's something I share. One thing that the proverbial spanner in the works is, if you look at the tanning industry, is highly conservative. So if you want to make inroads into the tanning industry and leather products, you're up for a little steep battle. And you have to kind of apply force from the guys who produce the goods, like the automotive industry. So you have to kind of convince them that your product is good enough to have an impact for them, and they will do a type of a forced conversion over time. But the biotech or the biomaterials revolution has been quite moving for a long time, but very silent. We have everyday items that shows making a small inroad, like a simple thing, a sponge made out of waste wood pulp with sisal fiber on the other side. It's something that can be used to clean yourself. You can clean the car. It's biodegradable. And many people forget this is a biomaterial. Same goes for hemp and hemp derivatives. So the fashion industry, as well as some of the consumer goods, there's already inroads. But I think if we are aiming for larger impacts like the leather industry as a group, we are looking at a little bit longer than 5 years. It depends on how well the biomaterials community can actually rally industry and also educate consumers. Consumer education is usually your most expensive endeavor because your general public doesn't know everything. So if you come and tell them this and this, and suddenly they hear a keyword that's been used by some kind of malicious politician, your perception has changed, no matter how innocent it is. So we are in for a challenge in the industry, but it's a fun challenge, and it needs enthusiasm, and it needs also a bit of support, not just industry, academia. Academia has to come and bolster the industry itself, because that's where the creativity comes from, and that's where trust comes from as well. So that's what I would like to add to that particular piece.
I agree with Francois.
Fantastic. Great thoughts. It's interesting because that prompts my next question, and maybe I'll direct this first to Zimri, and we'll move to others who want to answer. But Francois, you just said it's kind of this gap between educating consumers, academics, politicians to all be on the same page here, which I totally see as an important point. But if I work backwards from what I hear, it's always, well, the costs are going to be high and scaling's an issue, right? So besides, let's all accept that costs will gradually come down. That's inevitable, right? And let's assume scaling will be solved. What are the other impediments to progression of this field, not just for leather, but for all these other products, Zimri, you mentioned? If you had to identify where are the pain points, right, that you still need help with, whether it's on the academic fundamental side or whether it's on the engineering scale-up side, any of those would be really, I think, valuable for the audience to hear about.
Yeah, so I'll try to give a perspective that's unique to Bucha Bio being in Houston, Texas. We have big, massive incumbent oil companies, and I think to achieve true scale, true penetration, you need stakeholders from all segments to buy in on next-gen materials, right? So not only is it a challenge of scaling up your own processes and costs coming down and industry kind of buying in, but then you need the other stakeholders, the other parts of the value chain, to kind of come in and endorse this. And so here in Houston, I think we're working hard to talk with the biggest players here. Right now, we're worried about biogas and things like that, but I think should be worried and will hopefully start to come in and invest in and be part of these big companies, these heritage companies, be part of this transition, this energy transition we're seeing in Houston and material transition more overall. So I think that, it's about these older industries that are very mature, kind of waking up and instead of saying, no, I don't want this, joining what we're doing, endorsing, investing in these new industries instead of rejecting them. And I think that we'll see, and that it is a challenge for sure, but we'll be part of seeing these materials at a true scale.
Great, thank you. Other thoughts on that?
Sure. Go ahead, Francois.
Okay. What I agree there with the peripheral industries, there are some technologies that actually also need maturation. Because for the biomaterials industry, especially towards fashion items or leather, if you have to think of scaling efficiently, If you have to think of some of the approaches like 3D printing, can 3D printing scale? No. So can you? Currently not. So can you 3D print a piece of leather at an affordable price? No. Can you create smart metamaterials that can auto-assemble in different thicknesses to break some bottlenecks you typically experience in tissue engineering? So even something as simple as the petrochemical industry, biotech companies, no matter how much they say they're green and they do this and this, in the back end, there's lots of plastics that are consumed. And those plastics are all still petrochemical based. And why haven't there been solutions offered? Is the primary cost driver for the petrochemical consumables pharma, biotech, or academia? Where should the pressure be applied to adopt actual biodegradable plastics or glassware, which is typically seen as an alternative? You have to wash it. So you're using a detergent. Is this detergent a useful type of thing? Or does the detergent cause environmental fouling? Then autoclaving or sterilizing the glass. You're still using energy there. You're using a specialized kettle. So we need peripheral industries to also step up and realize we are in an industrial revolution, but the industrial revolution requires multiple inputs. It's a very difficult thing to drive from inside if you do not have support from the outside. You cannot effect the change if that opportunity is not offered. So that is what I think is of a crucial considerations, in my opinion, with this.
Thank you.
Axel, you want to go ahead?
Yeah, thank you. First of all, I really agree with my all colleagues, and I would like to say the only thing that can be considered as a challenge is mostly monetary. To increase the number and sales in manufacturing, you need space and maintain and create the product that you work on. And the good thing about bio-based manufacturing is you can start with enough money to create a base operation, and eventually, if you are ambitious enough, and you can broaden the entire operation into large scales. Right now, I would like to add, till this year, we are closing our investment stage, and in 1 year, we are able to pass our very first pilot scale operation. And because it's mostly about not giving up and working on it constantly to increase the quality and the quantity.
So I think we all agree that the main issue is scale to actually have an impact, but also, like Francois said, it's also very related to performance, right? So you can produce a lot of material that's completely biodegradable and it's really cool, grown with cells, but if it doesn't perform the actual standards, it will not scale or be used at all, and you will not have an impact. It's also important to mention that the material needs to be easily introducible into the existing supply chains and infrastructure and machinery already exists. Needs to be able to work with this material. For example, the canvas I have here, that's the name we call our sheets. It's a 1 by 1.5 meter canvas, which is roughly 15 square foot, which is half a cow, like the standard for leather industry. And it's also the standard for the textile industry rolls. So the machines that are used normally for these industries can use this material. So this is also an important factor when it comes to scale. Also, in our experience, as I said, we've scaled 4 times. This is our 4th facility. The first, we call it Folk 1 because it's the first of a kind bacterial cellulose facility in the world. It's the first one at scale, but it's the 4th one. We actually started in a borrowed lab space 7 to 8 years ago. Then we moved to a second, a basement space that was also like borrowed. It was there. And right now we're sitting on our 4th iteration, and it's the actual industrial scale one. We have everything in place, reactors. So it's been a long run, and I think this time, or what we've learned throughout this thing, experiments and experiences is what I just said. These are the 2 main factors: performance and scale.
Fantastic, thank you. So this prompted another thought, so maybe I'll direct this to Francois to start. So we've kind of focused more on the polymers so far, you know, the core material. We talked about performance, we talked about scaling, which is all really important. But aside from that, you all know there's other stuff that has to get added to make your final products, you know, all kinds of additives, binders, coatings, et cetera. So maybe some thoughts on, you know, how you look at that. What are the issues to consider there? What's being used today? Anything you can share either from your own work or just a broader view would, I think, be helpful to the audience as well.
Okay. So there's quite a few ways to touch on that particular one, but I'll start from, because we're a cellular agriculture company, trying to do a leather that's true leather, between inverted commas. If you think in terms of a scaffold, you have to ask yourself the question, does this scaffold affect the properties of the end product? Does this affect the type of tanning you're going to do? Does the scaffold change the sensory touch? Surprisingly, the human touch is sensitive enough to discern between a single layer of atoms. So if the mechanical sense is off, your consumer is going to be fully aware of this. Does your scaffold affect the smell? Does your scaffold affect any mechanical property like durability, or just straightforward tensile strength? So with a scaffold, you have to think, how will it affect my product? How am I going to scale this? If I have to think in terms of square meters or cubic meters of production, does it in the end envisioned with the industry wherever you're sourcing it from? Are they going to scale to make your product be marketable? And I'm not talking about everybody wants to go for the luxury goods, the big name brands. That's not really how you affect change in the long run. You have to create a mass-produced product that's affordable to the average person. So if you think of dyes, what is the dye from? Is it from an insect? Can you synthetically make it? What is involved in synthetically making this dye? The same thing with glues. Do we have to suddenly revert back to some of our ancestors to use horse hooves and cow hair? So once again, there is that type of glue. Can we come up with these new innovations in biomaterials, maybe smart metamaterials that can have temperature stimuli, pH stimuli, or even if there's a specific type of mechanical stimulus that it changes the property of the product for the better. So it's a complexity that we still don't have all the answers for. We've seen some nice developments in academia. Some futurists have wonderful ideas, and I've seen some 3D printing guys punting it heavily. And I'm very optimistic about it. It's just, I always ask, how does this translate in cost? What are you looking at? What type of product are you trying to replace? Will it be competitive in pricing? Or what is your education angle for the consumer going to be? As well as how are you going to convince them this is equal and or better? Because you have to do what you say on the tin. If you do not do that, you're going to lose the trust of the consumer. Some fashion brands had a huge kickback because they didn't say exactly what's in their product. And then this is not just the sourcing, but the manufacturing as well as in the compositions were completely not what they said it was. So these are things that we have to kind of consider across the board. And it's a scientific as well as a, how can one say, a marketing value chain that you have to create. How do you design your product from the start? Which field are you going from? This will dictate your design.
Thanks, Francois. Other thoughts from the panel on that? Other additives, other coatings, things you consider, dyes that were mentioned?
Yeah, I have to agree again with Francois on this. I said before, I think that this solution needs to be whole, the whole solution. So meaning using sustainable dyeing, sustainable sources for the process, but also solar power. For example, our plant is 100% solar power. So the LCA has to be kept in mind, the certifications that your process is actually compliant with these different regulations. But in the long run, I think that the way to go is to actually create these metamaterials that will solve all these problems at once. Instead of getting inputs from the outside into your plant, then you need for your bacteria to actually produce the colors, the pigments, or what you need. This is what we mean by metamaterials. And in order to do this, of course, it's important to involve the academia. That's why we have so much PhDs here. I actually started in the academic world. So, but I believe in applied academia to actually solve real world issues at scale, because that's the only way to have an impact. So yeah, that's my comment on that.
Thanks, Axel.
I'd like to jump in here. You know, I think just address your question directly about polymers, additives. You know, I think everyone here working with bacterial nanocellulose understands that it's not the entire solution. It doesn't get you all the way there. There are some things that bacterial nanocellulose is very, very good at. There's some things that it's not so good at, right? It's very good at being strong, at forming a matrix in some cases. Where it's not very good at is it dries out. It's very hydrophilic. It likes to absorb water, right? And so for those places where it is not going to meet that industry spec, you know, what are you adding? What else are you bringing in to reach that? And how do you think about those additives, and where do you compromise? Where don't you compromise? At Bucha Bio, you know, we have a commitment. You know, we don't want to use plastic. We don't even want to use petrochemicals, right? That opens up a whole nother bucket of worms. You know, nature is typically not super good at nature loves water. I mean, life loves water. It likes to absorb water. That's fundamental. So, you know, where in nature do we see water repellency? Where in nature do we see kind of some of these effects? There are that you have to look a little bit harder, right? And it's not so obvious, and it's easy to take an easy solution like petrochemical plastic. But I really think that the next generation of materials, you know, the big winners are going to be the ones that find those really creative solutions in terms of additives, polymers that don't rely on those existing chemistries, that look to these kind of natural sources. And they're hard to find, but they're there.
Just personal, fantastic comments, Zimri, because you're absolutely right. The solutions are out there. It's just a matter of finding the right match in nature and then translating that to industry, which is not always easy, but there are so many great solutions out there. Thank you. Aise, do you want to add anything to the comments, or you're good?
Yeah, sure. We are working with bacterial nanocellulose, just like our colleague, and you know, scientists tell us that raw material is nature's masterpiece. So when we are working with that kind of polymer, we can really manipulating for better, and we are just using natural dye, and it provides us not just use chemicals, you know, so we are not using any petrochemicals or, you know, toxic dyes. We are just only using natural dyes and tanning as well. So that's why we choose bacterial nanocellulose to be honest to consumers and our collaborators.
Great, thank you. So let me circle back to kind of where this started, which is, you know, people term the elephant in the room, which is scaling, and do it in a cost-effective way. So maybe we can start with Axel here, and just, you know, any comments on what are the biggest challenges you've met so far in scaling up, and, you know, what's your vision for how you're going to overcome those if you haven't yet? And if you have, great, share that if you can. And then I'd love to hear from the rest of the panel about this as well. So it's all yours, Axel.
Yeah, so it's very hard to scale these materials, to be very honest. It takes, as I said, 7 years of 60-hour weeks of very intelligent people and a very great team working towards this. Of course, we already know that solutions are out there in nature. Biomimicry is what this is, but to actually implement, as you said, in actual engineer it to work and to perform and to massively produce, that's the hard part, and it involves a lot of engineering, a lot of biology to actually understand the fundamentals. I believe in what Elon Musk says about first principles. You need to understand the first principles, as Francois said before, also at the nanoscale, the Armstrong scale, the interactions between atoms, this determines the performance, and you need to understand all these so that you can actually design, as I said, with the palette of biology, with the four main constituents, which are lipids, carbohydrates, DNA, and protein. So in order to do that, you need to collaborate with PhDs, do a lot of genetics, understand biology. And I think my summary is like, it's very, very hard to actually scale. We at Polybion have been able to do that. It took a lot of time, a lot of work, but we're producing these size pieces every day. Our current facility, for one, based in central Mexico, as I say, is one of the few geographies. It encompasses a lot of things going around. It's the biggest industrial corridor for automotive in the world. It encompasses 5 states in central Mexico. There's 5 OEMs here. But we also have a lot of agriculture, so we have a lot of feedstock. But we also have a lot of good geneticists. Actually, in this city, they sequenced the corn genome like 10 years ago, and recently the avocado genome, 2 of Mexico's biggest contributions to the world. The most consumed grain in the world is corn, was developed by the early Mayans in northern Oaxaca a few hundred years or thousands of years ago. So there's a lot of things going on around here, and very interesting. And as I said, but Polybion, we're using all this knowledge to actually scale and deliver on the promise. This facility right now is producing 100,000 square feet per year, but will produce 1 million square feet per year at maximum capacity. As I said, it's the biggest and the first in the world to actually scale these materials at this size. Again, this is a huge market. It's a 23 billion market, so there's room for a lot of players. And we are glad to collaborate and to contribute to this industry and to actually help our planet, because that's the actual reason we started this.
Fantastic. Thanks, Axel. Other thoughts on scaling challenges or successes or failures, whatever you can share?
I'll go and I'll give a perspective from cellular agriculture side. So one of the big bottlenecks for cellular agriculture is, number one, getting enough cells. So cellular expansion is a big challenge. How do you expand these cells? Typically, they use microcarriers. A microcarrier, if you do not want to use the plastic beads and contribute to environmental fouling, you want to go for the biodegradable ones. But your challenge comes down to, how do we improve these biodegradable carriers? That's challenge number one. Challenge number two is the cells need a feedstock because they need nutrients and they need source proteins to produce proteins of interest like collagen. Now, one of the biggest investments in cellular agriculture R&D goes in is to figure out if your feedstock can be without FBS and fetal bovine serum for the non-scientists in the room or people not in this industry. So something I can share from Qorium's side is we managed to get our cells to respond in feedstock media that has no fetal bovine serum in it. And we did that by a clever media engineering of growth factors that we got from peripheral industries, which are busy maturing themselves, so we can get easy access to all these proteins that stimulates the processes we want. So now we cut down on the need for the FBS, and we are getting a double performance in cell growth or cell expansion, as what was opposed to this is the way we've always done it, which is one of the most dangerous things to say in R&D, whether you're in industry or academia. To push it forward, you have to kind of break a bottleneck. Another bottleneck is, for tissue engineering lovers, is if you want to put cells on a scaffold, you are kind of limited by the 300 micron dreaded threshold of nutrients and oxygen being able to penetrate into the scaffolds. So if one can figure out clever ways to either increase the thickness of your tissue, or if a metamaterial is there that can channel oxygen from the surface into the center of the scaffold. These are types of things that I hope come soon in the industry, because what the, let's say the lab meat industry does, in which some of the, I think leather, in vitro leather companies do as well, is layer by layer assembly, where you have to produce a layer of 200 to 300 micron thick, and then you glue the layers together. which works. It's not ideal, but you have to, sometimes if your tanning process is a bit harsh, you get layer separation, no matter how good your glue was, because the layer-to-layer integration of the collagen was not sufficient. So that is a bottleneck specific for, I think, all players in the leather industry if one uses the thought process of traditional tissue engineering. So clever engineering approaches, I think, will break this bottleneck on the instrumentation, but also on materials itself. I've seen some interesting microporous materials doing the rounds. It's just trying to negotiate something affordable. Or getting academics to, no, 1 square centimeter is not enough. Can you make a half a square meter, 2 meters, something like that? So for the colleagues here, nanocellulose has been identified as one of those materials that can potentially do it. It just needs a little bit of tweaking. And I've had my hands on it, various types of nanocellulose, and I believe it can be done. It just needs one little extra step from whoever makes it.
Exactly.
Thanks, Francois. I see, or Zimri, thoughts? Scaling?
Sure. If I see, did you want to take that first, or? All right, I'll go for it. First of all, I wanted to, it's super, super cool. I feel like a total fanboy here with, like, I'd never get the opportunity to talk about bacterial nanocellulose. I mean, as soon as I talk about, isn't that kombucha, or isn't that like, I drink it at one time, like here I get to talk with people who've been in this and understand this deeply, and it's an honor, truly. And just wanted to shout out to you know, the approach to scaling up, you know, bacterial nanocellulose, all the work that Axel was talking about, the 7 years, the 60-hour weeks, like SE is the same, right? Amazing, deep work to get to that, you know, and that microbiology is inherently and incredibly complex. I mean, whether you're working with a consortium of bacteria and yeast or a single strain, you know, that is a very complex system. You know, for us to scale, you know, we realized that we really weren't the best microbiologists. But here in Houston, what we do have is chemistry, chemical industry. How do we think about this process more from a chemical perspective, more from a chemistry perspective? And like Axel said earlier, you know, designing a process for an existing manufacturing, you know, system or something that already exists is how you're going to be able to scale something up, instead of designing a really nice material from scratch and then saying, oh my gosh, I have a really great material, now what do I do with it? Realizing that you're going to have to redesign or go back and scrap your material to redesign it for scale, for the equipment, et cetera, you want to use. You know, here at Bucha Bio, we really took, all right, what's the production system that we want that exists locally or nationally, and how do we create a, you know, formulation, a process that fits into an existing manufacturing system instead of creating our own. And so I think that that's how we've been thinking about scale, without like the intense backgrounds and very amazing backgrounds of our colleagues. And we realized that we were stronger here.
Great, thanks, Zimri. I see, do you want to add?
I would like to add the tanning part, because, you know, we are not receiving our raw materials from the others. We are producing in our conditions. So working with nature is great, but at the other hand, it's really hard because we have to control microorganism conditions and our stuff. And the tanning process is the most, you know, the best part we have to done as a great shop. So if you need help, we are working with tannery partners, so they are helping us, and we are growing that challenge together. This is the most important thing. For example, Turkey is great about, you know, leather manufacturing. There's lots of company, and when they saw the material, they are also adding their, you know, experience, and we are growing that challenge together. So this is the one of this is a really important thing. It's collaborate together and, you know, passing that challenge in a good way.
Great, thank you. Why don't we have, I think, about 10 minutes left. Let's just first open it up to the audience. If there are any questions, please either, I guess you could put them in the chat. Otherwise, I'll keep peppering our panel with more questions, but let me just pause for 30 seconds and see if anybody wants to add. I know Francois addressed the bovine serum albumin question earlier, so I think we've covered that. That no, it's not required under the right conditions, but it's still tricky and has to be addressed going forward in many ways. So I don't see anything in the chat, so I will move on with one. I have one sort of, I'll call it my last question, which I already asked, but I'm going to ask it more directed for this round, and whoever wants to start can start, right? So what I really want to know is what do you think your first product will be, and when do you think it'll be out there for purchase? And I don't mean, you know, textiles or fashion. I mean, is it going to be a boot, or is it going to be a belt or something like that? So feel free to expand on that, but that's kind of what I was thinking, you know, so the audience knows, you know, really what to look for in the coming, hopefully, months or years for these kinds of things.
So maybe I can jump in here. Yeah, we've been working with global brands. Many of them, of course, we cannot disclose names, but basically all the top brands, both in fashion, in sportswear, and even automotive industries. So I think the first, or our approach to first product is we want, like, our actual objective is to massively deliver in terms of volumes, because that's the only way to have an impact on the planet. And in order to do that, we believe that it's not the right way to go for ultra luxury only and very low volumes. So we believe the first product might be a shoe, because a shoe requires a lot of performance. So if you're able to deliver on performance to make a shoe, and the actual shoe performs, then you're basically 80% of the way into automotive, which is the next frontier. So that's our first product. We've been working with a few brands on that side. We hope by the end of this year we'll have an announcement on that regard. We've been working nonstop on that. And as I said, a shoe is an important product because it's not as small as a watch, which we also have collaborators in watch and accessories. But the performance has to be very strong, very reliable, very consistent. Also the production capacity for the volumes of shoes that are made and the unit square feet and demand for every unit of shoe. So that's why I think that's a good product to start. But we'll see definitely other products in other markets, as I said, accessories, automotive, upholstery, other forms of transportation, not only cars. There's planes, there's trains. Yeah, I think those are the first ones. But as I hope, we'll incursion into other markets and on the same markets with other materials, with newly engineered materials. I think it's going to get really interesting in the next 2 to 3 years, because we actually are now working with a very great team of geneticists. So that will be very fun for everybody.
Thank you, Axel. Other thoughts? This is your chance to advertise, right? So go for it.
I'll jump in.
Go ahead, Francois.
Thank you, Zimri. So considering Qorium is a startup and we have some clever inputs from our post, we seem to be right on track, touch wood, as they would say, to have our handbag for the investors ready by June next year, a proper handbag. And from there on, it's if we meet that little piece of tick box, it means the automotive guys, I can't name brands, but they're Germany-based, are already that we have to go to pilot. So we have to accelerate very fast from June next year. So we are looking forward to it. It's a typical startup environment, as everybody here can appreciate. Long hours, hard work, but it pays off in the end. So we are very excited about it.
Thanks, Francois.
I also know the pain, like colleagues here, that they don't know. You can't disclose brands, you can't disclose names. That's the game, and everybody knows here that that's how it's played. But I can say that, like Axel, I think we're really proud that our first commercial, application will be a shoe as well. I think that shoes are really cool, not only because they're larger, like Axel said, they have the, the performance, the technical requirements that kind of prove the material out in the world in a really substantial way, but also they're a statement piece. You walk around, you walk around in your shoes, people look shoes up, like they are your identity. They are who you're expressing yourselves. I think it's a really exciting place to wear biomaterials, right? The thing is, and we're looking at a timeline, I think, our partners were looking at 2024. We'd like to get there sooner. They would also like to get there sooner. So hopefully we'll have it sooner than 2024 for the commercial release of that, piece of footwear. It's not even Shorai. It's not even the luxury leather alternative. It's something completely new, completely different. For us at Bucha Bio, thinking about what we're doing today, leather alternatives are a big topic. Where we want to be is what comes next? What comes after? How do we stop thinking about leather, plastic, etc.? What are really unique materials that look and feel and have an aesthetic that is different than anything we've seen before? That is this shoe. Stay tuned.
Great, great.
And I would like to add, we are already working with partners to create really some amazing footwear product, also belts and bags, one of the really fit products when we at the first sight. But for the purchase timeline scale, our partners really want to reach that scale in 2 years, we believe. And they will purchase like kind of this gorgeous product in 2 or 3 years, I believe that.
Thank you. Fantastic. I noticed there's a quick question in the chat from Eric on anybody willing to comment on their, I guess, the bioreactor systems you use for scaling. I'll just throw that out there where we have another 2 minutes or so before we conclude. Anybody want to comment on what you're using, if you're able to comment and to give some feedback?
I'll jump in here. I quickly saw the question, and one of the challenges is the industry is not set up for cellular agriculture, really, the existing industry. So we are kind of forced to go into figuring out a custom design to maximize the usage of floor space eventually, because you have to do a scaling model from your bench top to pilot. And if your scaling model does not fit, you're in a bit of trouble. So looking at what's available on the market, we have to innovate in-house. Unfortunately, this industry is so young, nobody's exactly sure what we need. So we have to, it's basically walking in the dark with a blindfold and shouting Marco Polo. And if you find something that works, you stick to it. And hopefully you touch the right thing that works. Otherwise, you have to redesign somewhere down the line when you're a bit advanced. And then it's almost back to square one, but with experience.
Exactly. So I would also like to add that I forgot to mention another very important aspect for scalability in our experience is vertical integration. So we believe in a factory that actually, well, that and using waste as raw material, because we were the first to actually start using waste as raw material for large scale biocellulose production, because that's it. If you think about it, the first principles, again, that's the only way to do it. Because if you're using feedstock that comes from intensive agriculture that uses pesticides and fertilizers and water and land, then it doesn't make a lot of sense. That's why we chose to use actual waste as raw material. And I think everybody should follow on that, because that's the only way to do it. And the other one is vertical integration. We believe that we need to, in our plant, like waste comes in and finished products of leather come out, maybe even confectioned already. So in that regard, it's great, the vertical integration, because you learn a lot from all the processes, and then you can implement that into the product and iterate and collaborate with people, experts on each area, and then this creates a huge momentum for the product.
Great. Since we're at the end of our session, I want to, but just conclude by You four are amazing. You're the leaders of the future. You're already doing it. Please keep doing it, and please reach out to any of us to help. And just keep moving forward. You guys are inspirational. So I'm so pleased to be able to have you talk today and convey what you're doing and your vision to the audience. Thank you very much.
Thank you, David.
Yes,
Thanks,
you.
everybody.
Echo everything David said and really appreciate all the expertise and insights that you shared today. It was such an educational discussion. I'd love to invite everyone who's attending right now to join us in the stage area, which you could access on the left-hand side for our next panel on the performance of next-gen materials. Thank you again and see you there.
Thank you. Bye-bye.